Love it or hate it, the first season of the world's most expensive television show has come to an end, and you're either like this,
You can't leave.
or like this.
Destroy it! No.
Come with me on an adventure as we take a look at Season 1's biggest questions, its connection to the books, and what we can expect for Season 2. I've left timestamps below for what we'll be covering. Be warned, this video does contain Season 1 and book spoilers. One of the biggest mysteries this season was the identity of the Stranger, the mysterious being that fell from the sky at the end of Episode 1. When the Mystics, a group of wraith-like beings with magical powers, eventually catch up to him, they declare that he is the Dark Lord Sauron, only to discover they're terribly wrong. So if the Stranger isn't Sauron, who is he? We know that he's an Astari, a Quenya word for wise one or wizard. There were 5 such wizards, which included Gandalf, Saruman, and Radagast. Now the question then becomes, which one is he? In particular, is he Gandalf? And the evidence supporting this is pretty heavy. Aside from the obvious, like him wearing grey and the ability to control magic, the Stranger also says a line directly from Gandalf in the Fellowship of the Ring.
If in doubt, Enoch, always follow your nose.
When in doubt, Eleanor Brandyfoot, always follow your nose.
Furthermore, when he dispatches the Mystics, we see a symbol of a moth, which Gandalf used throughout the events of Lord of the Rings. Not only that, we see him use the bright white light, similar to that used by Gandalf in Return of the King. Gandalf, after all, was known to be associated with this white light. What puts a damper in this theory is that Gandalf was not known to set foot in Middle-earth during the Second Age, even though he would have been alive at this time. However, I think there are some easy ways the writers could get around this should the Stranger actually be Gandalf. From a completely TV executive point of view, you'd want the Stranger to be Gandalf, as he'd be a big draw to the show. If I were a betting man at this point in time, I'd say the Stranger is more likely Gandalf than not. But what's next for him? At the end of the season, he takes off with Nori Brandyfoot toward Rhûn, a land so far east not much is known about it. Perhaps there he'll team up with other wizards and learn his true purpose. Rhûn is also known to be home to 4 dwarven clans, so I wonder if Nori and the Stranger will link up with them, and perhaps even Prince Durin, who I imagine may be looking for somewhere new to stay after essentially being ostracized by his father. The season finale also gave us the reveal of Sauron, with red herrings such as Adar and the Stranger prompting many viewers to question Sauron's true identity. Those of you with a keen eye likely had your money on Halbrand. Remember that Sauron during this time put on a fair visage, aka he looked like you and I, not that armor-clad behemoth we see at the beginning of Peter Jackson's Fellowship. He'll become that later on. Halbrand appeared seemingly out of nowhere, where Galadriel stumbles upon him while marooned at sea. He, like Sauron, is a master craftsman and smith. Remember that it was Sauron who forged the One Ring in secret. In episode 6, we learned that Adar supposedly killed Sauron for experimenting on his orc children, so when Halbrand asks him if he remembers who he is, he's wanting to know if Adar can sense that he's his former master. Another clue appears in the final episode, where Halbrand helps Celebrimbor solve his smithing problem, calling this knowledge a gift. During this time, Sauron called himself Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, and while he was never welcomed in Lindon, Celebrimbor was more than willing to keep him in Eregion to learn from his art and craftsmanship. Remember that Celebrimbor wanted nothing more than to be remembered as a great craftsman, hoping to one day be as good as his grandfather Fëanor, who created the Silmarils and Palantiri. After the fall of Sauron's master Morgoth, Sauron did repent and turn away from his evil deeds, fearing the wrath of the Valar, those spirits who shaped the world. He was ordered to return to Valinor to face judgment, but instead hid himself in Middle-earth. So when Sauron tells Galadriel he means to heal Middle-earth, he's not kidding. Even Adar said that Sauron devoted himself to the healing of it. This is to repent for all the evil he did while under Morgoth's control. That is, if you're to believe him. Galadriel did the right thing here, denying his proposal to become queen of this new land. But the difference here is that Galadriel wants to save Middle-earth, Sauron wants to rule it. So he essentially lets her go. Now I guess he could have killed her here, but he didn't. Maybe it was too risky to kill an elf in the middle of Eregion, or maybe he knew he could keep his identity hidden still. After all, Elrond also learns that Halbrand isn't the real ruler of the Southlands when he uncovers that scroll Galadriel was looking looking at in the river. But when he's about to confront Galadriel, I got the feeling he's not gonna do anything about it. Earlier in the finale, he said it was a mistake when he sent her off in episode 1, and that he should have trusted her. Now he doesn't want to make that mistake again, and chooses to trust her. He doesn't need to know the truth about Halbrand, just to trust and believe that Galadriel is doing the right thing. At the end of the episode, we'll see Halbrand make his way to Mordor. It is here that he'll forge the One Ring to rule them all, but that may take some mithril, in which case he'll need to get to Khazad-dûm, where we saw a Balrog at the end of episode 7. Sauron will also need to contend with Adar, the man who supposedly killed him. So my guess is that season 2 will see Sauron fighting for control of Mordor, the orcs, and maybe even the creation of the One Ring. For a show called The Rings of Power, there were surprisingly not a lot of rings. In total, the Rings of Power are comprised of 20. The 3 we saw for the elves, 7 for the dwarves, 9 for mortal men, and the One Ring to rule them all. In the book, the first to be created were the ones given to the dwarves and men. It was only after Sauron left Eregion that Celebrimbor went on to forge the 3 rings we see in the show. So I wonder how the writers will address this next season. It's not until 10 years later that Sauron will create the One Ring. However, considering the show has played fast and loose with the timeline, we'll likely see this happening well before then. As the rings are forged, you can even see the molten lava form the Eye of Sauron, showing the ring's connection to the Dark Lord. According to the book, it is Galadriel, Círdan, and Gil-galad who are the original bearers of these elven rings, with Gil-galad later giving his ring to Elrond. Each ring represents an element, fire, water, and air, which are represented by these colored gems. Not in the book is Galadriel's dagger, which once belonged to her brother. It'll be melted down to fuse with the mithril in making the rings. The rings then become a physical manifestation of both Sauron and Galadriel, Sauron's power and Galadriel's light. The expeditionary force that set out from Numenor has arrived home to a sad sight. Black flags adorn the harbor, which means the king is dead. Before his death, Chancellor Ar-Pharazôn commissioned draftsmen and some apprentices, including Elendil's daughter Eärien, to draw the king, but during her meeting with him, he grabs her arm, thinking she's his daughter, stating that if the old ways of their people are not restored, their island will fall. He's referring to how the Númenóreans once were friends with the elves, which they now look on with disgust. Eärien also discovers the king's palantir, an object whose chronic use made the king unable to separate what is and was and will be. Galadriel and Miriel were the only 2 who knew of this object's existence until now, so I thought it was rather interesting the writers decided to get Eärien in on it too. We never see whether or not she touched it, but if she did, who knows what she saw. In the book, Pharazôn usurps power from Miriel, and now with her being blind, this may even solidify his claim. She'll come back spouting how they need to ally themselves with the elves, and that people aren't going to like that, and thus back Pharazôn. I'm also curious if the queen will use the palantir as a way of seeing, since she doesn't have vision anymore. Miriel knows what's at stake here. She's seen in her dreams a huge wave destroy the entire island. This does happen in the book, but Elendil foresaw this disaster, perhaps the result of the palantir, and set sail for Middle-earth, where he and his people will later found the kingdoms of Arnor and Gondor. This season also left with some loose ends. For example, where's Isildur? Last we saw him, he was trying to save the queen after the eruption of Mount Doom, and Elendil believes his son to be dead. With him likely still in Mordor, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets mixed up with the Sauron-Adar storyline. We also don't know what happened to Isildur's brother Anarion, who was mentioned several times in the season, last seen somewhere in Middle-earth. Now I know this was a quick video, thank you all for watching, and please make sure to like and subscribe. I want to know what you thought about the season and theories for season 2 below. And for more bad takes, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ThinkStoryYT. Until next time, remember...
Today is my 111th birthday!